Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meuschke.
Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome to episode 271 of the show. And this week we're welcoming back Anni Meuschke for a sample chapter reading from Nature's Diadem. It is her short story that is appearing in the newly released Mystic Springs Anthology, a collection of anomalies. This is the latest anthology by the Writers of Warrensburg, a group that I am happy to say that I'm also a part of, and I do have a story inside there as well. For those interested, you can click the link in the show notes for this book. You can check out the rest of Anni's story and a whole bunch of others that are in there. Fantastic stories, I have to say. The reading today is really, really good, if I do say so myself. I'm really proud. As you heard from last week, this is my daughter, and this is her debut story in Mystic Springs. And she did a really good job reading her story, and it's a great teaser. It is not the entire story. It's just kind of setting things up and giving you an idea of what's about to come in the rest of the story. But I think you're going to enjoy what you're about to hear, and looking forward to that. Coming up this weekend, Saturday the 9th of November, the Writers of Warrensburg will be hosting a special book signing and celebration event at the Trails Library here in Warrensburg. So if you're in the area and you want to come by and get an autographed copy of the book by, I'd say most if not all of the authors who contributed to the book will be present. So it'll be a great way for you to get signatures from everybody there. But that is, again, it's November 9th from 2:30 to 4 at the Trails Regional Library. I'll be sure to share the links for it in the on the sample chapter pages on social media, wherever you follow it. Also for me, coming up in another week, November 16th from 8 to 3, I will be at an event in Hallsville. It is their annual Christmas shopping event that's going on. So I did that a couple of years ago when my first Bandit book came out, and the plan right now is to have the pre-order available for Bandit 3 available that day. So really looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. I had a blast a couple of years ago. I mean, back then, all I had was my first book, 9 Mile Bridge, second book, Novel Idea, and then Bandit 1 had literally just come out, and ended up having a really good time. Yeah, so looking forward to going back, because I'm going to have Bandit 2 there, the pre-order for Bandit 3, plus these both anthologies will be on hand for anyone interested. So I also look for that on our social media pages. I'll be sharing more information as that gets closer. There will be giveaways by all the booths that are going to be set up at the event, or many of the vendors anyway. But I do have something as well. I've got a nice little package put together. It's not books, so that's going to intrigue some of you perhaps to see what it is I have put together. A nice little care package for people that are going to be coming to check things out. So who knows, maybe you'll win that package, and then you can come by and say hi at the booth. Well, as always, make sure you're following the show on social media. We have pages on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as I like to say, Twitter X. Follow the show on all, whatever your favorite podcast platform is, because we are on all of them, whether that is Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon. Apple is still by far and away the biggest one, but I gotta say, the YouTube channel is really catching up on views, listens, all that. And it's really cool stuff, so make sure you're following the show wherever you find your podcasts. All right, well, I think that is going to do it for now. Actually, one other thing, in the show notes, I also have links to last week's episode, which was the interview with Anni, and in there you can hear us talking about her inspiration behind this story, her love for the Warrior books by Aaron Hunter, writing fan fiction, and gaining validation for your work. It was a really good conversation, and I couldn't be more proud of her. So anyway, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and head on over to Anni Meuschke and Nature's Diadem.
Hello, this is Anni Meuschke. I am reading my short story, Nature's Diadem. Brielle had never been in a real forest before. Parks and small patches of trees, but this was something totally different. It was striking. Gone was the sound of passing cars and human activity, all of it swallowed up by the trees and barriers of brush and leaves. The silence made her every step incredibly loud, and leaves crunching like thunder. But soon, the air came to life with birdsong. The boughs swayed peacefully and leaves rustled all around her in the breeze. The green of summer was still strong, only just beginning to tinge with yellow and orange. The world was awake in a way she had never experienced before. Books and movies could never do it justice. Sunlight speared through the canopy and dappled everything in shifting shadows. The ground was uneven, stones jutting out, bushes sprawled wherever they pleased, no hard pavement to keep a pace, and plenty to trip on. Brielle drank in the air that seemed to be getting more delicious with every step. Where were the springs? She hoped she was going the right way. The shriek of crashing metal snapped her from basking in the calm. Brielle hesitated as she listened to a scratching sound, unsure if she should interfere, then went forward curiously. An animal trap lay nestled against the trunk of a tree. Inside, a cat scrabbled at the wire walls. Brielle approached carefully, gazing at the creature's black and white markings and round yellow eyes. "What's going on here?" Brielle wondered aloud, searching the trap, moving a hand towards it. "Hey, don't let it out!" Brielle started at the voice and twisted about to see who it was. A young man approached, his blonde hair a rough tussle on his head, and brow furrowed seriously over bright blue eyes. "This is part of a cat population control effort. I've got to take this guy to the vet now." "Oh, I'm sorry." Brielle blinked at him, then turned back to the cat with new understanding. "A TNR? Or are you rehoming?" She'd never seen a trap-neuter-release program in action before. The boy's eyes gained a curious light as he stared at her, realizing she understood the mission. "That's up to the vet, whether it's too feral or not." He kneeled beside the cage. "It's all right, little one. We're going to help you," he soothed, though he only got a low growl in return. Brielle studied him curiously, but relaxed as she noticed cat food in the bottom of the trap and saw how genuine he was with the animal. She stepped back to let him do his work, watching with fascination. She'd always wondered how rescuers handled a trapped animal. He draped a blanket over the cage, and the growls inside fell silent. He then turned to her and offered an awkward smile. "I'm Gavin. You must be new here." She nodded. "I just got off the bus earlier today. I'm Brielle." He fixed the blanket more squarely over the cage. "Good to meet you. Here to see the springs?" She answered honestly. "Kind of. But this whole area seems really nice." She watched him for another moment before blurting out, "Do you need help?" Again, his gaze flicked to her in surprise. "Do you want to?" When she nodded, he uttered a small as though unexpectedly impressed. "All right, you take one side, but don't put your fingers between the holes. Some of these cats are merciless." He waited for her to grasp the other end of the cage before hoisting it up. Then he led her along a narrow path back to a truck waiting on a dirt road. Once they'd placed the cage in the truck, he dusted his hands and collected another blanket from the back. "Thank you," he said, nodding back to the woods. "I have a lot more to check if you want to come along." Brielle brightened, pleased to be of service. "I'd love to help. First day in town and already committing to some community service? Yes, please." She mused over this newfound purpose as she followed him back into the trees. As she did, she looked about in quiet awe of her surroundings. All the trees looked healthy, the plant life thriving, and based on the amount of prints she was finding on the trails, so were the animals. Now that he wasn't carrying a cage, Gavin seemed to walk like every single step had to be carefully planned. He sidestepped as much as he could to avoid stepping anywhere that wasn't already bare soil or rock. He barely seemed to bend even the grass as he went along. Gavin glanced back at her, apparently aware of her fascination. "Are you, like, a naturalist or a biologist or something?" Her cheeks flushed as she realized how odd she might look being so fascinated with the forest. No, I'm not anything right now but a cashier. I'm just a nature enthusiast?" Brielle had given hundreds of hours to documentaries and books just to be stuck with a fascination she'd never called upon until now. "Me too," he nodded as the path began to thicken with rocks. "Watch your step through here," he warned, pointing out the moss grown over the stones. "Looks harmless, but I've cut myself more here than with the cats." Brielle chuckled and obediently watched her step. Over the next few minutes, he pointed out a field where deer often bedded down and a tree with scratches where a bear must have left his mark a long time ago. "Did you go to school for this?" she asked him, impressed that he knew so much about this land. "School? No, I couldn't afford it. Still can't. Gavin considered his words as he looked up at a barking squirrel. "Watch. You can learn a lot just by watching." Thoroughly impressed and slightly jealous, Brielle followed him through the paths he knew so well. She listened, enchanted, as he spoke of all that he had seen here and guided them back to the truck with cage after cage. She was so enthralled that she didn't dare complain that the hiking was getting difficult. Not even when she slipped on the stones he had warned her of and scratched her hand. She hadn't the slightest idea how many miles they'd trekked or how many hours they'd spent. Finally, back at the truck, she was dirty and scuffed. Her legs promised to be sore for at least a week, but she beamed with pride as she looked at the cages in the back. "Where now?" Brielle asked eagerly. The sun was on its downward track now, but she wasn't ready to stop. "To the vet," Gavin said with a flourish and a smile as he opened the driver's door. "Do you want to see that too?" Brielle nodded eagerly. "Are they going to be open right now?" Brielle asked as they pulled in. "Not to the public," Gavin said. "They closed an hour ago, but someone will still be inside, giving medicine, checking up on the animals, stuff like that. They'll let us in if we go through the back." She stepped out with him and hovered by the door as he knocked. She jumped when the door quickly opened. The scent of animals and cleaning supplies spilled out. A lovely dark-skinned woman smiled at them. "Gavin, you're early! How many today?" There was a huge grin on Gavin's tone as he answered proudly, 4. "Only 4? The woman sounded delighted. "You're doing God's work, Gavin." He laughed. "No, ma'am, that's your job." She had a sweet, heart-shaped face and lines around her eyes that evidenced a lot of smiles. Her gaze moved to Brielle, and Brielle got the full sense that this woman was perhaps the kindest she would ever meet. "Hello there," she said, her tone warm and curious. "I'm sorry, I don't recognize you." "This is Brielle," Gavin said. "She helped me out today." "Really?" She raised her brows in surprise as she looked at Brielle. "How kind of you." "This is Anni Dunstan, our very own veterinarian," Gavin said. "She's the angel helping me with all these strays." Anita wagged her finger at him. "Ain't no one an angel here but you." She offered Brielle a hand. "Gavin doesn't usually ask for any help. You must be very interesting." Brielle blushed as she shook Anita's hand. "I don't know about that. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." "Oh?" Anita glanced curiously at Gavin. "She's fresh off the bus," he explained. "I found her at one of my cat traps, and she offered to help." Anita stepped outside. "Well, that's just wonderful. Nice to know we have some good tourists around here, not just looking to dirty up our town. Too many tourists lately just here to chase ghosts." Gavin sighed and rolled his eyes. Rico. He showed Anita where the cats were, and they started taking them inside. Brielle listened carefully to their conversation. Rico's podcast was the whole reason Brielle knew about this place. But Anita and Gavin talked like he wasn't doing them a service. "I hope those tourists aren't messing with the water," Brielle said. "Of course they are," Anita said as she lifted up a cage. "It's the whole reason most people come here. Of course, our water is the best." Her eyes twinkled. "I just wish they had a little more respect for our residents and didn't leave their trash scattered in the forest and whatnot." She sighed and shook her head. "Anyway, enough griping. Let's get these kitties unloaded, and I'll take care of them." Brielle helped move the cages into the clinic. She listened politely as the pair made small talk and waited patiently when they were leaving. Was everyone here so warm and kind? The sun was low in the sky by the time they headed back outside, giving final farewells to Anita. "How's your hand?" Gavin asked Brielle as the door closed behind them. Brielle blinked at him and flexed her hand on impulse. She had nearly forgotten the scratches after slipping on the rocks. "It's fine. I'll have to clean it really good whenever I get back." He tilted his head at her and held out his hand. "May I see it?" She started to assure him again as she let him look, but trailed off as he was staring at her scratches with such profound intensity. She couldn't decide what he was thinking. His brows cinched together seriously, and he stood eerily still for several seconds. "Gavin?" He blinked at her, then gave a small sigh through his nose. "If you don't have any other plans, there's one more thing I could show you." Brielle stared at him, confused. "The spring," he explained. "There's still a couple hours of light if you want to see it." "Oh," Brielle glanced at the sky, then back to him. "Is it far?" Her legs were tired, and she wanted to clean her hands soon. "Not very," he promised. "I can get us there in a few minutes, and you can rinse your hand in the spring." There was something so sincere and imploring about the way he said this, like it would be so special. And she had to admit she definitely wanted to see it. "Okay." He smiled and patted his truck. "Let's go then." Within a few minutes, he parked once again by the forest. They got out, and he led her up a path she had not taken before. She adopted his style of walking again, setting her feet carefully where he set his. "We're nearly there," he promised as her pace slowed. "The spring?" "Yes, the spring." He gave her a look that made her think he was picking his words. "Have you seen it yet?" "No, not yet," Brielle said, getting more curious at how serious he was. "Have you heard about it?" "Of course, it's kind of famous." "What do you think of the legend?" he asked. "That it's magic?" Brielle thought to be careful with her words, too, not wanting to offend him. "I don't know that I believe that, but I'm sure it's beautiful." He gave an amused grunt. "It is beautiful," he said as he walked. She looked up as she heard babbling water, and soon they stepped through a gap in the trees. Her eyes widened as she beheld the scene before her. It was the kind of thing you could only see in movies. The water rushed endlessly before them, crystal clear, twinkling in the setting sunlight, rippling in its roam over a rocky bottom. In awe, Brielle moved closer and peered in. Minnows flitted along, and crawdads crawled along the stream bed. A freshwater mussel poked out from the coarse sand. Moss was growing on the bigger stones, and the roots of the surrounding forest seemed to stretch straight to the very edge of the water. Oh, wow," she breathed. "This is the cleanest water I've ever seen." Gavin smiled as he followed her to the edge. "It's amazing, all right. If you follow the stream up, there's a rock face with a little waterfall. Up there is where the spring begins." "Wow!" Brielle couldn't hide her excitement. This really was the town's best-kept secret. "And it's this clean throughout?" She searched the water, hunting along its edge for any other treasures of wonder in its depths. He smiled, looking pleased that she admired it so much. "Sure is. I do some cleaning here and there, but the water handles itself pretty well. This is, gosh, just so gorgeous. I love this. Can I see the spring?" She turned to him and was surprised to see him hesitate. Her excitement curbed. Maybe she was getting too ahead of herself. This was such a special place, and maybe he didn't want to share. He tipped his head, and she couldn't read his expression as he studied her. His mouth was pressed in a firm line, his brow pulled together, but his gaze was more curious. Finally, he tipped his head to the sky and ran a hand through his hair. "Come here," Gavin said, taking a seat on the bank. "Let's wash your hand." It almost seemed wrong to put her dirty and scratched hand in something so otherwise perfect. But Brielle came over, sat with him, and dipped her hands in. If nothing else, the cold of the water would soothe the dull pain in her palm. A few seconds passed as she let the wound soak, as per Gavin's instruction, then blinked down at her hands. The water wasn't cold enough to make her feel numb, yet the pain was lessening. She stared as the red irritation faded, and the scratches sealed themselves back up. Any grit left in the wound slipped out as they pushed, and in seconds her skin was fully restored. Stunned, Brielle slowly flexed her hand, wondering if it might start hurting again. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen in real life. Yet her hand flexed and moved normally, and completely without pain. Beside herself, Brielle looked at Gavin, who smiled innocently at her.
And there you have it, folks. That was Anni Meuschke reading a sample from her debut story, Nature's Diadem. It is a short story from the Mystic Springs Anthology, a collection of anomalies by the Writers of Warrensburg. The book is available right now, so click that link in the show notes for more. You can also find where to follow Anni and her artwork, and you can find the link for last week's episode with her interview. Don't forget to hit that follow button so you don't miss out next time when I'm back with a new author, a new book, and an all-new sample chapter. Thanks for following, everybody. I'll talk to you real soon.